Hi, and welcome to Multiple Sclerosis, the Owner's Manual. My name is John Laverty, and I've had primary progressive MS for 25 years. This video is about mobility and things that can help with mobility. Now, I am sitting here, as I'm making this video, in a wheelchair. I've been in a wheelchair for about 10 years. Because I've had MS for 25 years, that means I went for 15 years with MS without being in a wheelchair. Not everyone who has MS ends up in a wheelchair. That's something it's just not true that you end up in a wheelchair. I happen to end up in a wheelchair because that's my course of the disease. No two people with MS have the same course. And anyone who has MS knows this. So here's my story with mobility. My very first symptom happened when I was in my mid-30s, and I was jogging one day, and I noticed it felt like I was running in mud. It was very troubling, and it was a harbinger of things to come. So I started out, I had trouble jogging, that turned into trouble walking, turned into balance difficulties, that turned into random falls here and there. Eventually, and this was long before I was diagnosed, eventually I had to use a cane. And I have to say, buying that first cane, I remember exactly when I decided to get it, where I got it, and how it helped. And I have to say, getting a cane, that was one of the smartest things I ever did. That helped me at that point in my life so much, that to get around and just to be able to live life, continue working, continue traveling, doing almost all of the things that I was doing in life without MS. So fast forward a few years, the cane eventually is not, it's not enough. I need more help. I need more stability. So for me, the cane turned into a walker. I used a walker for a few years. I even went on a job interview in a walker. And I have to say that at first the walker was quite a nice device in terms of helping me get around, but I made a big mistake with the walker. I used the walker for about 2 years too long. I should have transitioned earlier into a wheelchair for a number of reasons, and I'll talk about those in just a second. So my wife and I discussed it, and I ended up on my own going out and buying a wheelchair. Now you can get a serviceable wheelchair for a relatively inexpensive price, usually under a couple of $100s. You can get it from a number of places. You can order them online from Walmart or Amazon. But they're not very good quality, and they're not really what you need. Well, I had to find that out the hard way. So I got this lame wheelchair. So for a couple of years, I'm using this wheelchair, and it's just ugly and it's unsafe. And finally, I'm convinced by my wife to talk to an occupational therapist. An occupational therapist is someone who does an evaluation of a person to see what kind of device they might need, and helps them. In my case, the occupational therapist helped me to get the proper wheelchair that was fitted to me, to my body type, that was in every imaginable way better than the original wheelchair that I had gotten. So I get this wheelchair, and I have to say, it's a Ferrari. It was spectacular. The difference was was really remarkable. It was so much easier to get in and out of a vehicle. The back seat folded down. The wheels came off so you could get it actually into a sedan. And I used that wheelchair for 5 years until it was time to get a new one. And then when I got a new one after that, it was even better. I was happy to discover that my insurance paid for 80% of the cost of my new appropriate style of wheelchair. Now, the new wheelchairs are pricey, but you get what you pay for, and I'm thrilled with the wheelchair that I have. My regret with it is that I didn't get the proper wheelchair when I decided to get into a wheelchair, and that I didn't do it earlier. I really should have done it a couple of years earlier. And I think of those 2 years when we were traveling, when we would go to the mall or go to a concert or go to the movies or go do anything. And I was hobbling around in a walker. I've often thought about how much life would have been better had I been in a wheelchair. Now, the decision to go into a wheelchair requires a couple of things. It requires of the person going into a wheelchair to completely check their ego and pride at the door. You cannot have your pride get in the way of making your life better. And that was one of the things that convinced me to get a wheelchair in the first place, was my wife saying, "Don't you think this will make life better for you?" And when I finally came to that realization, palm plant on my head. Yeah, I think it will. And you know what? It did. I don't feel bad about being in a wheelchair. In fact, being in a wheelchair has given me freedom because it's given me mobility. It has allowed me to do a lot of the things in life, and it's allowed me to see things in a little bit different perspective. I cannot believe how kind people are. I cannot believe how helpful people are in all sorts of situations. For me, being in a wheelchair was one of the smarter things I did. Now, here's a complaint I have about the whole process. It would have really been helpful. And this is a message to all you neurologists out there. It would have really been helpful if my neurologist had said to me, "Why don't you think about getting in a wheelchair? Here, I'll help you." I got no advice. I got no help from my doctor. He never asked me how I was doing getting around. He never asked me my activity level. Never tried to help me get to somebody who could evaluate my needs and how to get the proper equipment. You cannot wait for your neurologist to help you with this. You have to be insistent about getting that help. I wish my doctor had helped me. That was unfortunate. That caused me a lot of difficulty, and it caused my wife a lot of difficulty, and it really did not contribute to my experience with multiple sclerosis. Mobility is an issue for a lot of people. It's not an issue for everyone. Not everyone who has MS ends up in a wheelchair. But ending up in a wheelchair is not the worst thing in the world that can happen to a person. For me, it has been a liberating experience. Well, I hope this video has been helpful, and I hope you watch my next video. That's it for now.